You are listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 8th of April 2025 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio One here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme.
But it's getting to be very dangerous territory, and hopefully those talks will be successful, and I think it would be in Iran's best interest if they are.
Talks between the US and Iran are to take place on Saturday, but can they prevent the dangerous consequences Trump alludes to? From there to Vietnam, which has offered to end all of its tariffs on the US in a desperate bid for a breakthrough to save its economy. We'll also check in at the first official day of Salone del Mobile in Milan. We'll take an exquisite look at the diamond market and finally, the finale of White Lotus. I have two very eager guests ready to unpack the show. Fernando Augusto Pacheco and Laura Kramer. You both raced home for this last night. How are we feeling?
I'm devastated, but it was a very satisfying end to the series.
And all I can say, Chris, that the White Lotus is like a pack of bonbons. It's must-watch TV.
And there might be a bad bonbon there sometimes, Fernando. Spoilers coming. Watch out, people. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. Direct or indirect, that appears to be one of the questions for US-Iran talks that are set for Saturday in Oman. Donald Trump yesterday revealed during a meeting with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the two sides would indeed be holding negotiations over Tehran's nuclear program and other aspects of Middle East security. The announcement did come with Trump's characteristic warning that far more dangerous options were in the works if the talks failed. And joining me now right here in the studio is Burcu Özçelik, Senior Research Fellow for Middle East Security at RUSI. Burcu, good afternoon. Always good to have you. This announcement by Trump did seem to catch a lot of people unawares, even though he had been speaking with the Ayatollah Khamenei, sent him letters before. Were you surprised by this development?
I was surprised. There were sort of some signs that this was a possibility and indications that Trump certainly preferred direct talks. Late last week, in fact, he mentioned that this was not completely off the table, that direct talks were an option, that he preferred these because it saved time. You were speaking directly to your counterpart. And because he's been quite adamant since early on that he would prefer a diplomatic solution to a military one. This seems to align with how Trump has positioned U.S. interests as not being favorable towards a protracted war in the Middle East centered on Iran.
And Trump, as you say, does prefer direct talks, although Iran responded that these would not be direct talks necessarily. Does that matter for the eventual outcome? What are we hoping for from Saturday?
I think what matters much more than the format, and there have been sort of a back and forth, and the optics around indirect or direct certainly matter for both sides for different reasons. The Iranians want to sort of save face. They want to go into these negotiations with multiple, even competing interests at play. And they have to cater to their domestic audience, which is not a homogenous one. And so all of a sudden conceding that they have agreed to direct talks with the United States after months of blasting the American administration for various operations and tactics in the Middle East would seem like they were betraying their oath to the Iranian public. And so I don't think it's as consequential whether they're direct or indirect, but what matters is the parameters of the talks, what is actually achievable. And there's much to be yet to be seen. A lot of sort of questions around what the Trump administration or his team, led by Witkoff, it now seems, what they're hoping to achieve. This isn't going to be a quick and easy deal. This will not be something that is wrapped up on day one. And I'm sure there is an awareness on both sides that indeed this will be a sort of a protracted period of negotiations, but not too protracted, because that, again, is not in the interest of the United States.
I was going to say, I mean, there might be an awareness that these should be protracted negotiations, but that isn't really Trump's style. He wants things done quickly, or he is going to threaten consequences if things are not done quickly. What do you make of sort of how much patience Trump might have here and what he actually wants to come out of this?
Well, diplomacy skeptics on all sides in the United States as well as in Europe have argued for a long time that diplomacy just will not work with the Iranians because they're only conceding to this to buy time. But Trump has sort of tried to get ahead of that and set this timeline of 2 months. And there's a deadline later this year, which is the snapback mechanism through which the E3 countries could reinstitute sanctions against Iran that were lifted during the JCPOA or the Iran nuclear deal. And so there are kind of well-established deadlines now, confirmed deadlines on the calendar, whereby the Trump team will be able to put some pressure upon the Iranians to say, we don't have forever. We need to get there sooner rather than later.
But what is, of course, interesting about this is the fact that you mentioned something like the Iran nuclear deal and the deadlines that are in place for that. Trump, of course, himself famously pulled out of that Iran nuclear deal, so he doesn't necessarily have an interest in at least that form of a deal. What kind of deal do you think he wants in its place?
There are those who are arguing for a more maximalist deal, one that goes beyond just the nuclear program, but it also includes Iranian concessions that they will walk back from their support for the various proxy groups across the Middle East, that they will no longer support and supply and fund these fighters that are hostile against the United States and Israel, that Iran will also walk back from its ballistic missile program. And these are, well, the regime in Iran has already said that these are our red lines, that particularly the ballistic program, they will not concede to walking away from, as well as a peaceful nuclear program. I think what's most likely, and given that the wider picture here is that Trump wants a deal. He wants a success story. So the low-hanging fruit, and again, it is still a challenge, though, would be some type of verification mechanism that allows for external observers, international observers, to be able to monitor Iranian progress, various sites, and to be able to basically implement some of the provisions that the JCPOA had in fact in place and Trump walked away from. And bear in mind that this is a huge sticking point for the Iranian regime, and that they believe that they were verifiably conducting their activities in line with the JCPOA provisions. And it was President Trump during his first administration that walked away from that. So the Iranians are coming into this with the belief that they held to their side of the deal back then. And that will be a challenge.
And just finally then, or one other aspect of this, I suppose, is Iran's motivations. When you mentioned the proxies in particular they have in the region, that has changed in part with things that have happened in Syria, for example. Does Iran have an interest in maybe relinquishing some control there?
I think there is a reality that Iran must now reckon with, that the Middle East has undergone a significant transformation in the aftermath of the October 7th attacks. And Iran's proxy network across the Middle East, Hezbollah, Hamas, as well as its strategic ally in Syria, of course, have been degraded. And in the case of Syria, the regime has collapsed. So Iran's strategic calculus must also change along with that. And the priority for the regime in Iran is survival. And I think within certain parameters, they understand that they will have to make some concessions. But within an understanding that they will be treated with respect, with mutual dignity, and not be bullied into the corner in the way that they have been afraid would happen to them if they publicly announce direct talks are an option.
Birger Öztürk of RUSI, thank you very much for joining us. And now here's Carlotta Rebello with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. China has vowed to fight threats by President Donald Trump to place more tariffs on its imports. Beijing will incur an almost 50% extra import duty if it fails to remove the retaliatory duties placed upon the US. The president has dismissed suggestions that the levies could be paused. South Korea has officially set the date for its snap presidential election as June 3rd, following the removal of impeached leader Yoon Suk-yeol last week. Leading contenders have begun to throw their hats in the ring, including Lee Jae-myung, the populist leader of the opposition Liberal Democratic Party, and Kim Moon-soo, Labour Minister of Yoon's Conservative People Power Party. And a US-Russian crew of 3 has successfully launched to the International Space Station on board a Russian spacecraft. A Soyuz booster rocket lifted off as scheduled from a launch facility in Kazakhstan earlier today, with the team set to dock around 3 hours later. The astronauts are scheduled to spend around 8 months at the space outpost. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Carlotta. Now, Vietnam is facing some of the steepest of all the tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, a 46% rate that prompted the Southeast Asian country to respond almost immediately with an offer to completely eliminate its own tariffs on American imports. That's because with the U.S. being Vietnam's largest export market, these tariffs threaten to devastate its economy. And whether the Trump administration is actually willing to negotiate the rate is, of course, another matter. Well, I'm joined now by Dr. Toan Nguyen, Research Fellow at the Development Policy Centre, Crawford School of Public Policy at the Australian National University. Toan, thanks very much for coming on the show. Perhaps we could start with why Donald Trump and the administration targeted Vietnam with such a high tariff rate. Is that about Vietnam or is it about China?
I don't think it's about Vietnam or China. President Trump's decision to impose 46% tariffs on Vietnamese imports arise from his administration's focus on addressing trade deficits for the U.S. And Vietnam has a significant trade surplus with the U.S., as we already know, reported as about $123 billion last year. That positions the countries as a target for these tariffs.
And Toan, as you say, this is related to the trade surplus that Vietnam has with the United States. What can Vietnam do to try and ameliorate that, to improve that, and answer some of Trump's concerns? It is now offering to end tariffs. Will that help?
Yeah, and you mentioned that in response to the U.S. tariff announcement, Vietnam has offered zero tariff for U.S. goods. Export to Vietnam. And Vietnam has taken quite a comprehensive and proactive approach, including the high-level talks between the top leaders of Vietnam, General Secretary Tô Lâm and President Trump, and sending a special envoy to Washington. Economically, Vietnam has reduced tariffs on 23 U.S. Imports, and the country plans to push the imports of U.S. LNG, airplanes, defense, and technology. And also, Vietnam cooperated with the American business in the country to seek for the support of the tariff delay while the negotiation is going. Additionally, the government has set up a task force led by the Deputy Prime Minister to assess the impacts and formulate the countermeasures.
And just finally, Toan, what kind of impact would this have on the Vietnamese economy if the tariffs do remain in place and none of these negotiations work out?
To be honest, the impact would be significant. It would be a significant negative impact on Vietnam economy because the tariffs. 46% tariff is very high, and it will reduce the demands of Vietnamese export to the U.S., particularly textiles, electronics, furniture, machines, and leading to the job loss in the export-dependent industries, and the spillover effects on other industry as well. And more important, it also reduce the foreign direct investment into Vietnam, and may lead to the currency depreciation, and the stock market may suffer a lot due to the uncertainty.
Toan Nguyen, a Vietnam expert, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. You are back with The Briefing. I'm Chris Chermak, and it is Salone del Mobile week in Milan, the massive annual design fair officially starting today that leaves a design-focused magazine like Monocle in a frenzy of excitement, running from exhibit to party, back to exhibits, and between all of that running and Ubering, taxiing, I'm joined now by Monocle's Grace Charlton. Grace, I believe you are in a taxi as we speak.
No, I did a hard jump out because I was worried about having to arrive at my destination and pay and be on the phone with you, and it was just all going to be too chaotic. So I will walk an extra 10 minutes to my destination.
That is very sweet. We really appreciate that. Where are you going?
I'm currently in a back alley of Brera, and I'm going to talk to the head of design at Range Rover, which is quite rogue. But there are a lot of car brands this year at Salone who are getting in on the action. So that's been an interesting new development.
That is an interesting new development. What kind of things are they bringing there? Are they turning this into a car show?
No, they're sort of bringing their design ethos and their sort of sleek, chromatic look to furniture. So, beautiful couches, that stuff we love to see. Range Rover are doing a collection in partnership with Nuovo, which is a Californian who like to create time capsules for the 70s, and they are really deep into it. They choose the music, they choose the scents and the look and the furniture. So I'm excited to discover it.
Now, Grace, I understand you've also either been hanging out with already or you have been tasked to hang out with some of the young designers at Salone del Mobile. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the Team Gen Z side of Monocle's design. I was just at the fair right now. It's the first day that the actual Salone del Mobile trade fair opens, and they have this really cool section of it, which is dedicated to designers who are under the age of 35. It's called Salone Satellite. And I was just, walking around, looking at all the talent, talking to the youth, and gathering info.
And
what's going to matter? Who's going to matter?
Well, who is going to matter? I mean, how are they feeling in general? It's nice that they have this space. Is that something that was important, would you say, for Salone? I mean, you have all the big design firms there. Was it important to kind of separate this out, give the up-and-comers some space?
Definitely, because otherwise brands with a lot of money, like maybe Floss or Cora, they do the most amazing booths and installations, but it would be good if you were a young designer with no money to sort of compete full of attention. So Satellite does that, and it's been going for 26 years, and a lot of famous names have come out of it.
So, Grace, you're seeing cars, you're seeing the young designers. I wonder if there's a particular sector item of furniture that you're most excited about this year. Nick Manise, our design editor, was on the show this morning, The Globalist. He was all about lighting. What excites you? This is a sign I'm getting older and older. I'm really excited by sofas this year because it's been on my mind. I recently purchased my first sofa. So, I used to maybe gravitate to chairs a little bit more, or lights before that. And now I really appreciate balance, the comfort and the beauty of a humble sofa, Is there a particular sofa you have your eye on? You've already bought one. What are you looking for there?
I know I shouldn't really be looking because otherwise I might regret my own purchase. There was a beautiful Piero Lassoni one I saw at Poro this morning. It's called Biscuit. What a cute name for a sofa. And it's got little wooden panels that are meant to replicate wafers, and then the couch itself is like the cream. But it's very minimal. It's very chic. It's not at all, like tacky. It's gorgeous. Classic Lassoni.
Classic biscuits. Classic biscuits there. Just finally, Grace, just tell us a little about Monocle's own events. What's happening there, the parties and different things that you're planning with the whole team there.
Yeah, we're doing a festival of radio tomorrow in partnership with Design Singapore Council. We're taking over a beautiful little chiesa, a little church. And if people are interested, I think all the info is on the website. I don't know if I'd be able to, off the top of my head, give it to you correctly, but we'll be doing like mini panels on the hour from about 3 p.m. onwards and 3 p.m. onwards. So if anyone's in town, drop by.
Do drop by to check out Monocle's team and the Festival of Radio. Grace Charlton from Monocle, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Briefing on Monocle Radio. It is time now for a roundup of news from the world of diamonds. And for that, I am joined right here in the studio by Tobias Cormand, co-founder of 77 Diamonds. Tobias, welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me here.
We wanted to start with the British royals because they are perhaps the experts of all diamonds. They're heading to the Vatican and they're taking the royal crown jewels with them.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're going to travel that heavily, actually. Camilla...
Not all of the royal crown jewels, fair enough.
Maybe just some, a small selection. Camilla is actually quite understated, so the Queen tends to underdress, a little bit, and actually is not very flashy in terms of, the choice of jewelry that she could be wearing is obviously enormous and immense. And then she has her few kind of picks that she likes, but it's generally pretty understated. I mean, she prefers to wear little, and it's going to be, mainly her pearl collection. She likes the kind of four strand of pearls choker, and then every once in a while the tiara comes out. So in Italy with the state visits, I think for the gala evening, they'll probably be like the Greville tiara, which is a gorgeous piece from the 1920s, basically, which was gifted to Queen Elizabeth, and she's highly likely to wear that, actually.
Is there thinking that goes into this, do you imagine, for Camilla, also where she's going, both the fact that it's a state visit, but also going to Italy? How does that kind of factor into what she thinks about to wear?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the royals traditionally have very much taken into account kind of the local population, and so in various visits, if they have, for example, a brooch is obviously a very popular kind of emblem, which can be localized depending on where the brooch was made or what it symbolizes. I mean, today she was spotted wearing a diamond and sapphire brooch. That was her only real big piece of jewelry. It's quite a large piece of jewelry for her, but that I don't think has any special significance for Italy. But if they have a piece that they can wear for the local population, then they'll try and do that as well. Otherwise, it's just to project kind of their personality and as I said, a little bit understated as well.
And is it all about the personality? Just finally on this, like, will she be advised on what to wear here, or does she really pretty much have free reign, pardon the pun, to decide what she wants?
Absolutely, free reign. I think she'll be advised, and she'll have really a kind of spoiled for choice in terms of pieces. She'll have her favorites and things she likes to wear, and she'll pick from that, basically.
So one other story that you wanted to highlight for us, we are entering the auction season for high jewellery, and Sotheby's will be unveiling a blue diamond from Abu Dhabi, the Mediterranean blue. Tell us about this.
Yeah, well, it's not actually from Abu Dhabi, but it's being unveiled and displayed in Abu Dhabi, but it comes from South Africa. So it's... Probably, the estimate is $20 million, but actually it's highly likely to go for more than that. Because if you look at kind of the recent auctions, and that, by the way, that would, I think that it's going to go anywhere from $3 to $4 million per carat, which is what some of the more recent large blue stones have gone for. And this is a fancy, vivid blue, so it's the rarest. Blue itself is one of the rarest diamond colors that you can find. The only rare color is actually red, of which there's less than 100 in the world. And it's a 10 carat, it's a 10.03 carat, which, given what we're expecting it to achieve at auction, so $30 to $40 million, would put it at somewhere around the kind of the fifth most expensive of blue diamonds to be auctioned, basically. And there are some larger diamonds that have never come to auction out there in terms of blue, but it's incredibly rare. And actually, they used this occasion, so this is Sotheby's, and the auction's actually going to be on the 13th of May, to monogram the diamond as well, because the GIA, who basically grade the diamond and give it the vivid blue moniker, I've said that they've uncovered some scientific research which basically determines that blue diamonds are formed much deeper into the mantle than normal white diamonds, basically. So normal white diamonds would be found at 150 to 200,000 kilometers, but blue diamonds are formed somewhere around the 400 to 600 kilometer depth, basically. So pretty incredible new piece of scientific information. You heard it here first. And so it's got its own moniker as well, which makes it even more rare.
And just finally on this, what does it say that this is taking place in Abu Dhabi? Is the market in the Middle East the one that everyone is kind of looking at the moment for some strength when it comes to these big luxury auctions?
Yeah, well, there's no question about it that the Middle East has been hugely influential in the luxury market, and especially collectors of rare items. And, a lot of the diamond names we know today in the luxury world, have made their fortune selling into collectors in the Middle East. So it's always been an incredibly important part of the market. And especially now that China is under pressure, they were emerging as really strong buyers. I think that, the Middle East has kind of been stable throughout. China seems to be going, it's going forward, but kind of a little bit more up and down. But I think it's just, it is a sign that this is one of the homes. I mean, Dubai and so on as well have emerged onto the stage and are becoming home for a lot of luxury brands.
Tobias Cormand, co-founder of 77 Diamonds. Thank you very much for joining us. This is The Briefing. You are back with The Briefing, and the phenomenon that is White Lotus has come to an end. The third season of the television show, at least, taking place in Thailand. The murder's been revealed with a finale on Sunday night that we are about to spoil. So for anyone who has not watched the finale but intends to and doesn't want to hear what happened, you might want to save this portion of our show for later, because I'm joined now by two of Monocle's culture experts and serial White Lotus watchers, Fernando Augusto Pacheco and Laura Kramer. Now, as I said at the top, for both of you, you went home last night, you watched the whole thing. Laura, I'm going to start with you. You sounded like you were distraught.
I was. I cried no less than 3 times during the finale. I thought it was very satisfying. I thought it really captured what the whole series was about this year.
So this is a good sad, a good distraught we're talking.
It was a satisfying sad. I think it was an exploration of pain. And here we go. First spoiler, Rick and Chelsea both die. And the double death. The whole premise was that Rick's whole life, he built up this idea in his head that it was ruined and he had pain in his life due to the fact that a man murdered his father. And in the end, he murdered his own father. And it showed that he was actually the catalyst of this pain in his own life. It was about religion and spirituality and these ideas. And so I thought because of that, it was very satisfying in a way, because it was exactly what the show was about.
Fernando, it does seem like when one looks online that it's gone a little back and forth. There's been sort of positive and negative reviews. You kind of either love it or you hate it, almost feels like, in this finale. Where do you stand?
Well, I disagree with both of them, because I think it's as good.
It was just fine.
It was great, but I think it's as good as season 1 and 2. And I think people need to understand that they were in a different place, and I think that's what Mike White wants to show. What happens in Thailand doesn't necessarily will happen in Italy or in Hawaii, for that matter. And I think Laura will agree with me what I'm going to say here. I think The White Lotus is a series that you have to savor it. It's not necessarily, I have to be honest, it's been a slower season than the first 2 seasons, but that it doesn't matter. It's about the dialogue, and I also think it's quite reductive to call The White Lotus simply a satire of the super rich. I think actually can be quite relatable. In fact, my favorite characters were the group of 3 female friends. They were bitching all the time. It was quite, I didn't know which direction would go, but I think it ended beautifully. I think Laura was crying. I think that was the moment that actually made me feel very emotional when one of the friends said, "I'm happy to be here on the table." It was quite deep.
Did you cry, Faye? Come on, you can. We're all friends here.
I had tears in my eyes, but I think I was tears of joy that good TV still exists. This is very important because it's going to leave a gap on my TV schedule.
That is a very philosophical answer, Laura. TV still exists. What will we do without White Lotus? It has to come back.
Well, it is coming back. That's the great news. Season 4 has already been greenlit, and hopefully it's not going to be as long of a wait in between the last one, because we did have the writer's strike that took up a lot of the time for season 3 to come out so late. So we're expecting season 4 around 2026, sometime maybe early 2027. But hopefully it won't be as long. We don't know who's going to be in it yet, but of course people are speculating, especially to where it's going to be held. Now, Mike White, the creator of the series, says he doesn't want to go to every continent, and I'm wondering if maybe we'll be exploring Africa on the next one, because a lot of the series have been filmed in 4-season resorts, and I was looking at the 4 seasons. They've got 5 properties in Africa that potentially we could go to. I think somewhere Serengeti would be cool. Maybe some animals, some sexy leopards, something happening.
I can see that totally in my head. I think Africa would be such a good one. And let's be honest, in Africa you have these amazing resorts, extremely luxurious. It would attract a certain clientele as well. I would go for Japan as well as a second option. I think Kyoto could be good. They have a 4 season in there.
Many options there. And in terms of the format, Laura, is there anything you think they should change when it comes to a 4th season? Slower, faster? Where do they go from here? How do they stay innovative and keep people watching?
Well, I think it's really going to depend on the location, first of all, and who the characters we're going to see. I don't know if we're going to see Greg Gary come back again. We've had him in every single series so far. We'll see if he's going to come in the 4th one. But I think
kill him off right at the beginning. Maybe that's a way to sort of switch up the format.
I think he's okay in his pad where he's at in Thailand. But I think it's so interesting. It's this return to not just the series you have to watch weekly, but you have to watch it almost live, because you don't want spoilers the next day, which has happened to all of us, myself included, with the finale. But also, you don't want to miss out. You want to be part of that water cooler conversation, which has been such a great joy, the discussion around the seasons I'm most excited about.
And we need to talk about numbers here. I think the ratings for the 3rd season were superior from the first 2, so it keeps on growing. So I think HBO needs the White Lotus 4th season. I mean, I think it's not a matter of if. I mean, of course, there will be a 4th season. I predict there will be a 5th as well.
Laura Kramer and Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you very much for joining us and unpacking that spoiler-filled show. That's all the time we have for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Monica Lillis and Ryuma Takahashi. Our researcher was Francesca Jokes, and our studio manager was Lily Austin. The Briefing is back tomorrow at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.